everyone. Welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is October the 3rd, and we are going to look at Matthew chapter 2 today. And this covers a fairly broad span of time, and I think that there probably are some associations made with this passage that may not be true. You know, there's some assumptions that people make during the Christmas season because we see certain things always together that may not be completely accurate. And the interesting thing is Matthew's text is not even as clear as some other texts may be. But it says, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod, well, let's just stop right there and begin talking. It says about this time. And what I was referring to is often we see the wise men and the shepherds at the manger, nativity scene. Mm-hmm. But it does not seem that the wise men showed up at the nativity. So is the timing, I guess the question that I want to kind of start out with, is the timing important? Is it critical for us to know exactly when this happened? Or is it just the information that's important, that the wise men actually came?
I think it's okay when you're doing like the little plays and stuff for the wise men to be there in their cute little costumes, But like in terms of accuracy, yeah, I think it helps for context to understand that they did not live at the scene of the manger. Like they weren't living in that barn for like an extended period of time, like months or years. But I think it's okay that one of the nice things about it kind of being lumped in there is that we have that information. Like people know of the wise men and why they came. Whereas if it wasn't lumped into the story, even though, yes, it kind of would have been more accurate, that did happen later, I don't think people would remember it as well. Just as like in future weeks or future days, we'll be looking at some other things that happened early in Jesus' life. A lot of people who are not within the church would not even know of some of his younger years. And so I think there's some benefits, but also there's some of having it lumped in, but also some benefits of knowing the full context of it.
Yeah, I think, at least for me, part of the importance of knowing the context of it and that there is this pretty significant delay, time lapse when they get there is to understand that God had a plan and purpose for their timing. Not everybody's timing is the same. We often make assumptions that we're all going to arrive at that place at the same time when that's simply not the case. He works with different individuals in different ways.
Mm. How many wise men were there, Zack?
Well, the plays, the skits always say 3.
Why?
Why? Does it say anywhere that there are 3?
I think the assumption is because of
there were 3
the 3 gifts that are mentioned.
Yeah.
3 gifts.
But if you didn't bring a gift, you're not very wise.
Yeah. But we don't know.
So it goes on to say, King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" I just saw something that I hadn't seen before that it kind of threw me off. But the question I have is, why was Herod so disturbed?
I thought you were going to ask, why was everyone?
Well, that's the thing I hadn't seen before.
That's the question.
So are they referring to everyone? I felt like I was reading something my wife had written. Mm-hmm. Because she says always everyone. She's going to listen to this and scold me too. But she says always everyone, everybody, all the time.
Paints with a broad brush,
yeah.
all encompassing.
And the question I had, like that I just had outside of Herod, because I was going to ask the question, why was Herod disturbed, is was it everyone? Was it everyone he talked to, just the teachers and religious people who were uptight? Who was the everyone?
I mean, everyone could be everyone. I mean, you have this promised king that's going to be coming in, and people had different ideas of what he was going to look like, what he was going to do. They weren't completely sure, but they knew there was going to be a huge change in the power dynamic. You know, this guy who is the Son of God and the Son of Man coming in. And if life has been going well for you, that might be a thing to worry about. You know, if King Herod being the king at the time is beneficial to you, then knowing that this king might be coming in to usurp him or to change things, I think that could drive some fear for those who are benefiting from the times.
Yeah, obviously, he's disturbed as to the everyone. I don't know that it means every single individual. I do think there were groups of people, particularly in his circle, people who maybe were favorable toward him. You got to think that some people would have been excited about this, about the potential change. Yeah, finally, because Herod's not necessarily a nice guy. We'll see some more of that later. And so obviously there were a lot of people who would love to see him go. And so I have to believe in its context that when it says everyone that he was associated with, as you said, maybe everyone he had counseled with, everybody he had talked to, was in that way.
Yeah, so beginning in verse 7, it goes on to say, Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star had first appeared. So that's pretty clear. There has been a span of time from when they saw it to this point. And it says, and they still have a journey to go. I mean, they still have to go to Bethlehem at this point. Then he told them, Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him. After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house, so that's another clue that we're not at the same place.
Unless they renovated. You know,
yeah, we're going to stay here.
On that trough.
And it said they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chest and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So there's several questions that I have right here. One, why do you think he was manipulating the wise men to find Jesus? Why was he using them to find Jesus instead of him going to look for him himself?
Multiple reasons in my mind. One, they obviously had some insight that he didn't have. It was clear to them they were on a mission to find this, quote, newborn king. He was fully aware of that. So he wanted to take full advantage of that. And the other part of that is I have to believe that because of Herod's behavior and demeanor and treatment of people, that if he'd have gone on his own or sent his folks, that they probably wouldn't have been cooperative and wouldn't have given the information. And third part of that is this child had to have some protection from this wicked, evil king, and so therefore he wasn't allowed to be able to do that.
Yeah, also too, I mean, we find out later in the passage that he wants to kill him. You know, that's the reason why he's really trying to find Jesus. And it's a lot easier to take out a baby than a king. It
seems like he would just go along with them, though. You know, and he lies about his intentions. What do you think about people who lie about their intentions?
The worst. Yeah, I think it's. Granted, I have lied about my intentions before too, but even when I had good intentions.
Are you lying now?
But you're the worst.
I am the worst. Sometimes I am, but I think that's something that, you know, it's hard to respect someone when they lie about their intentions.
Yeah, it shows a deep, deep character flaw and undermines the ability to believe or take for face value motives outside of that. And it's usually for selfish motives and reasons.
Now, about the star, I could have asked it at the beginning, but I'm going to ask it here because it says after they left, they guided them on, stayed over the place. Do you believe this was a temporary star or a permanent star that moved?
I mean, when I look at it, I don't see any stars that don't move still. So I don't think it's permanent. You're saying like if it's permanent, like it's still.
Well, I mean,
Like this was a
we still
special
have
star
this was a one-off
that occasion.
supernova. Maybe that probably is the right terminology.
Well, the fact early on, I think it's verse 2, it says, we saw his star as it rose. I tend to think, and I don't think it's not significant in the sense it doesn't matter per se, but I think perhaps it was a designated thing for that special occasion.
I don't think one just was like and went there. Like when it says his star, I think of it appearing then.
Yeah.
And we think of like a little star in the sky, but stars are enormous. It's like one of the most powerful things, in the galaxy, a star, that just appeared because of a guy, because of Jesus. It's just kind of crazy.
Yes, I don't think there's any way for us to know. Yeah. I kind of lean to the side that I think it was a supernatural manifestation,
special, unique.
That continually guided them to the specific place.
Yeah. Something I've often thought about, I certainly don't have the answer, is, but as it guided them, they were traveling, no doubt on foot, probably with camels or other means. Mm-hmm. That wasn't a super fast process, and yet that star moved, but only at the pace for which it was beneficial for them. Mm-hmm. Rather than the thought process, driving down the road at 70 in the 4-lane, and you're like, whoa, there it is, got to go there. It had to be both at times very slow when it had to stop so they could stop, at times, and they had to pay attention to it, obviously.
Could it have been a manifestation very similar to the Israelites as they left Egypt?
I think so.
Cloud by day, fire by night.
I think absolutely could have been.
Okay. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. What's the symbolism? Any specific symbolism, or is it just?
I think it's Tim Hawkins. He has a joke where he says like they bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The worst gifts, get him a blanket, because the song, a child shivering in the cold, let us bring him silver and gold. It's like, he needs a blanket. He's cold. What are you going to put gold bricks on the kid? But what are the significance of the gifts? I know people say there is significance. I know that frankincense and myrrh, one of the two I know, is used to ferment dead bodies. Is that correct?
Spice is often used, yeah.
And that could symbolize how he had come to die. That was his purpose. Gold, I'm not sure, but
well, I think traditionally, at least the most common aspects, at least what my experience has been, is when these are looked at, and the gold would represent his kingliness, and the frankincense, you said spices, for burial, and myrrh. I don't know. Yeah, but that's kind of been the common thread. Is about his royalty, his deity, his burial, and even, I'm going to go in an area that I probably don't need to because it takes too much time, about incense and offerings of prayer and all those things. But so, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, I do think they have symbolism. The gifts were not cheap. Mm-hmm. They are significant. When they're given, they are unusual for a baby, but they're not unusual gifts for a king.
Yeah,
yeah, that would be the thing I would say.
Yeah, and I think some of the other things to take away from this is they were intentional about preparing gifts before they ever got to where they were going.
And these are Gentiles. It's not like we're talking about Jewish people who are coming to worship a king. These men from the east would have been Gentiles who were excluded, which leads me to the question that I want to ask based on verse 12. It says, when it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. What God do you think these wise men were worshiping?
I don't know what God exactly they were worshiping, but the God that warned them was the God. Mm-hmm. We could
really go haywire right here. Do you think that at times people's pursuit of other gods, they encounter the real God?
Yes. Yeah. We don't have a lot of knowledge or on the backside of this story of what happened to them, how they led out the rest of their lives with these encounters. This star that was significant, this encounter with the baby, God warning them in a dream. We don't know that part. But to limit God not to have the ability to interact with people while they are on a journey searching for other things.
Seeking for something. Because I think that the Bible tells us if we seek, we'll find.
Yeah.
It just depends on how open we are to receiving.
Yeah. It's there's the book and the movie The Case for Christ, and the purpose of that guy is this interviewer he's going to write this piece on why God doesn't exist, why God is dead.
Strobel.
And because of his pursuit of trying to find proof that God is not real, he ends up coming to faith. As he's trying to find his I find that really fascinating. Even when I was in college, in my personal studies, I was a Christian. I believed in God, but I decided that I wanted to study up on other religions, other faiths of the world, not because I was interested, I want to worship these gods. It was because I wanted to understand where other people are coming from. And that only drove me closer to God from learning about others.
I'll admit this is a question I have asked multiple times in my life, and I still struggle with today. For me, it's a dilemma in that I see people in other religions whose life resembles what I see Christ in the Bible, but they don't believe in Christ. They haven't. That's the piece. It's like that. The piece is a big piece. Don't get me wrong.
Big piece,
but that piece is missing.
Yeah.
And then I see people who profess to know Christ, and their life looks nothing like Him. And it just, I don't know. I really, it's a real dilemma for me.
I do understand that. We have a lot of biblical example of that, with the scribes and the Pharisees, the religious people who were so far away from what they should be. And then oftentimes you see people, like you said, even Gentiles, that lived the life that was much more like Jesus than the people.
Didn't even know who they were praying to.
That's right.
Because I even believe by the time, we're a little weeks away from talking about Cornelius, but I'm not even sure he knew he was praying to at that moment, completely. It's just, as a Gentile. We need to hustle on. Verse 13 and 14, it says, after the wise men were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up, flee to Egypt with the child and his mother. And the angel said, stay there until I tell you to return, because Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. That night, Joseph left for Egypt with the child and Mary, his mother, and they stayed there until Herod's death. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet, I called my son out of Egypt. So I'm going to ask you, Zach, first, because you have a newborn and a 3-year-old.
Yep, 3 years old.
If the Lord spoke to you and said, go tonight,
leave.
How difficult would that be for you to leave tonight?
How difficult?
Yeah. Pack up and move.
I have to get the car seat adjusted, but for the baby. But that would be very difficult. I like to leave in this situation. I feel like I'd be like him, if it's to protect, if it's like Steve's gonna kill your family. That would never happen, of course. But if it was like that, or someone's like, someone's gonna come and kill your family, it's like, oh my gosh, I would immediately pack up everything and go. But it's harder when it's just like, hey, I'm calling you to something else, and that does happen where God says hey, because I really do love it here. I have trouble imagining myself anywhere else in my life right now, and so if that was to happen, I think it would be very difficult. It's not easy to just pick up everything and move.
And Jay, you don't have those encumbrances, but if the Lord said tonight, pack up your truck and roll, how difficult would it be for you?
It would be very difficult. I would have to know beyond any shadow of a doubt. I like to think that if it were that clear to me, that I would do it, not understanding, not knowing circumstances or length of time, all those things. But it's a lot easier to say than it is to do, particularly, again, when you're traveling with his spouse and this young child.
Okay, I have one last question. So Herod goes on to kill all the children. Mm-hmm. Verse 17 says, Herod's brutal action fulfilled what God had spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A cry was heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning. Rachel weeps for her children, refusing to be comforted, for they are dead. How do you feel about a prophetic fulfillment that kills children?
Well, I don't see this as the prophecy came, so therefore Herod had to do it because of the prophecy. I see it as the prophecy foretold what was going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not pro killing children, I will admit, but I think
you say things so casually sometimes.
But I would completely agree with Jay in that prophecies aren't. I mean, sometimes prophecies, like God's like, I am going to do this. You know, I'm going to bring this down, and the prophecies are foretelling. It's telling the people, hey, this is going to happen. God's going to bring this down. But I think sometimes it is just like it's Herod himself that brought this upon. I mean, Herod brought this to come.
Yeah, but this has been prophesied hundreds of years before.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again,
isn't there a way around it?
Once it was prophesied?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But then again, though, God does, many times, he does give an out in a lot of cases. But this is another one of those things, though, that does point to Jesus being the one that God spoke of.
Yeah, a part of that, too, is the validity and credibility of who he actually is, based on those prophecies that were often hundreds of years prior to.
Okay,
it's an interesting thought and question.
It's a risk, because the question that I immediately begin to ask is, what things are happening today that we consider to be horrendously terrible, that are just God's prophetic words coming to pass? Yeah. You know, Zach, you want to close us in prayer?
Sure. Lord, as we look at this story from early in Jesus' life, God, I just pray that we would be encouraged, Lord, that we would seek you. God, I just pray that for those of us and those who do not know who Christ is, who you are, God, I just pray that they would come to a knowing faith in you. I pray, Lord, that we could encourage them, that we could point them in the right direction, God, and that in all things we live to glorify you. So we thank you, God, and pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.